Hello and welcome to another episode of Retail Media Thursdays. My name's Mandeep Mason and I'm VP of Partnerships and Corporate Development at Sky. Today we've pitched up in Muswell Hill and we're delighted to be joined by Ruth Zohrer, who's EVP at Bain & Company. So why don't you come join us too as we grab a drink and talk all things retail media. Welcome Ruth and thanks for joining us for this week's episode. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. We couldn't have asked for better weather, so
Definitely.
Super happy.
Absolutely, and it's a lovely venue. It looks like it's being set up for someone's wedding on a Saturday, so we picked pretty well.
We are being very festive today indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we go ahead and understand from you the pub we're in, why you chose it, and what we're doing in Muswell Hill.
Yeah, with pleasure. Well, listen, I think the Victoria Stakes is quite an institution in Muswell Hill. It's been around for over 100 years, but the reason I like it is because it has a very community feel to it. It's owned by Ben and Lucy, who are part of the neighborhood, and they do a great job at getting us all together from time to time. And they happen to be dog lovers like me, so that is a prerequisite that they tick, and I love coming here.
It would be good to get things going by understanding a bit more about you and your background and your role at Bain & Company.
Yeah, with pleasure. So I've been at Bain & Company for almost a year now. I'm coming to my anniversary very soon, and my role within Bain is to be part of the expert group. In my case, I'm a marketing expert. I work hand in glove with management consultancy teams in client-facing projects. And the role that I play is basically to bring the expertise from 15 plus years in industry to help ground our strategy in some of the opportunities as well as challenges of implementation.
Fantastic. Probably moving on a bit, so I think you're quite unique in the vantage point you have working with retailers and brands, and that's actually a very similar position that Sky values. You know, we work with retailers as customers, as supply partners in retail media, and then with lots of large global consumer brands. I think our viewers will probably want to start off focusing on the retailer side. So, you know, retailers have a lot on their plate with their core business, the online commerce operation, and now fledgling retail media businesses that in themselves need a great deal of attention and nurturing. So what sort of questions are you getting from retailers and what requests are you getting from them for support at this point in time?
Yeah, well, the fundamental question for them is around that diversification of their revenue streams. And so invariably retail media is one of those areas where they're willing to invest in order to grow, as I said to you earlier, beyond trading. Now, when it comes to retail media specifically, what we find is that generally speaking, we see retailers that have already taken that step, and so the support that we may have for them is different to those that are thinking about it from scratch, right? So for someone that doesn't have a retail media proposition today, our support will start from strategy, so helping them define that ambition, and more importantly, how that ambition aligns with the rest of the business, then translate that ambition into the value proposition, and then really land that value proposition into the capabilities that they need to develop to be successful, right?
Sure.
For those retailers that have been in this space and already have a retail media network proposition, we may support them more around understanding their level of maturity, the gap that they have vis-a-vis competitors, and then from there creating a plan to help them shorten that gap, and in some instances, if they're able to do that, overcome those competitors as well. And so for a lot of them, we'll look into their go-to-market strategy, but we may also look into the optimization of the existing product, and more importantly, some of the innovation opportunities that they should be investing into to be able to compete and to win in that space.
Yeah, I think you touched on some really important points there. I can imagine that retailers have a great deal on their plate in terms of the breadth that retail media programs are taking on. And at the same time, it's getting incredibly competitive, right? At a time when a lot of these retailers are seeking like incremental sort of spend from brands beyond the kind of core joint marketing budgets they may have seen from their vendors over the years. What do you think it is that's keeping them up at night at this point in time?
I think for me, when I look at the conversations we have with retailers, the shrinking margins, right? In a business that has historically been single-digit profit margins, having even more pressure on that is difficult. And in order for them to successfully navigate the current times, they need to think about what other elements are going to drive growth, right? And so with retail media being estimated over $90 billion globally and continuing to grow at double-digit percentage, it is not uncommon to think or to hear retailers speak of it as the future of their business. We believe in taking quite a rigorous approach to understanding whether retail media is indeed an opportunity, right? and to help them really carve out the right retail media proposition in order to be successful. The reason I say that is because it's not just about getting the retail media network proposition up and running and then advertisers will come. As you've said it already, it's a very competitive environment. So they need to think about what are the key differentiators that they bring to the market that will encourage advertisers to spend part of their budget on them as opposed to other parts of the marketing plan.
Absolutely, and you kind of tied into my next question there, because I think retailers that have chosen a method to get to market with a program are realizing fairly quickly it's not just build it and they'll come. And when we say they will come, it's the brands, it's the dollars that flow with them, the incrementality that retailers are looking for in those budgets. I'd love to double click a bit more on like what you think some of the recommendations are that you're giving to retailers to help make sure that that program thrives for the long term.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the key assets that becomes differentiating in this space is first-party data. Is an understanding of the shopper, right? And being able to tie that understanding of the shopper to value generated for advertisers, in this case, mostly consumer product companies. When you think about that as one of the core assets, then that leads you to either scale plays, if you think about the Walmarts of this world with the vantage point that they have across the consumer set, or a more niche play. These would be your specialist retailers, for example. And the way you would structure a retail media proposition varies significantly whether you are a scale player or whether you are a niche player. The revenue generation opportunities also vary significantly, yes. And so for us, it's important to recognize what is that unique selling point that a particular retailer has, what are the key assets that support that unique selling point, and more importantly, how do you structure the retail media network proposition in a way that really validates and supports those unique selling points vis-a-vis consumer product companies and other advertisers. And I think that tends to be one of the areas that is often overlooked, to your point. So having a very rigorous approach to understanding where to play, and more importantly, how to win, is one of the areas where we add a lot of value to clients when they're thinking about launching their retail media network propositions.
That makes a great deal of sense. And with that structure you described, is there a best practice that you've seen from a particular retailer, either one that you work with or perhaps one that you've recognized in the industry that you think really reflects the way things should be done?
Well, we've worked across a series of engagements, and I would say what really sets the winners apart from the laggards is their ability to think strategically, as I've said before, but more importantly, translate that into a change management plan. When you think about what it takes to launch a retail media network, and we were speaking about this earlier, it requires a very different type of talent. It requires a very different type of operational setup. It requires a very different type of tools, technology, processes. And so thinking that building that business as an appendage to what they do today, or in a completely unchanged setup to what they have today, is unrealistic. And so the winners understand that launching this new proposition will require new talent, will require an overhaul to the processes and the operating model, and will require some very important decisions around the technology that they either build, buy, or partner with. And that's where we really see those retailers that make those decisions with the rigor required, that really think about the options, and that stay true to the value proposition that they want to bring to market to consumer product companies, are those that win, versus those that just want to launch it and don't think about this.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think it underscores the need for like more structured kind of consulting programs within tying together all these pieces and teams, right? I'm doing your job for you. Right? So
I was like, I have to agree with you on that.
You can buy me another beer afterwards. Maybe we could change gear and talk about the brand side of things for a second. So similar to yourselves, we've been in a great position for a number of years to work with a lot of large consumer goods brands. And we're seeing a lot of dynamics around the way that there are varying levels, as you said, of brands that have embraced retail media. Some of them that we think are really crushing it. I think others are still on their journey navigating the complexity that's emerged. But one thing is pretty clear, that we've seen many of these brands are expecting or setting very ambitious goals around the percentage of sales that they expect to be coming from online versus physical. And we know, for example, that the pandemic and also retail media has given some tailwinds, but the goals are still pretty ambitious. What's your view about that ambitious goal setting, and what are you doing to help these brands on that journey?
Yes, I think consumer products companies find themselves at a very, very interesting inflection point right now. You're really seeing the convergence of what historically has been trade, marketing, and sales in many spaces. And I think retail media is one of those focal points right now, precisely because it enables to bring that through. I think there's also some broader industry changes from an advertising perspective, like the deprecation of third-party cookies, that have meant that the proximity to the sale becomes more and more important in terms of that budget allocation. I think from our perspective, we think the companies that are able to do away with internal silos from an organizational perspective and really put the consumer at the heart of what they do, understanding that end-to-end experience from first exposure on, let's say, a TV ad, all the way through to what happens in store with physical shopper articulations of the brand, down to some of the online propositions, are the ones that are going to win. But it is true that this brings a level of complexity that I don't think marketing departments have been used to dealing with before. And our role there is to help them evolve their approach, to work with them hand in glove, and with their agencies in many cases as well, to be able to understand what should the marketing organization of the future look like, what metrics they should be driving, and more importantly, how the strategy and the execution need to change in order to deliver that.
That makes so much sense. And I wondered within that, are you seeing any signs that these teams that have typically been trade marketing and digital marketing focused are coming closer together inside consumer goods organizations to drive some efficiencies, or you still think they're operating quite separately?
I think it depends on the level of maturity of the consumer products company. I think it also depends on the center of gravity in terms of where they operate. Certainly North America, Europe, really taking a step forward in terms of how those teams come together. Generally speaking, if I can use some of the projects that we do and some of the questions that we have seen, and even back in the day when I was in agency, the direction of travel where a lot of these companies were heading, I would say that is true. There's a greater need to understand how these different pieces of the consumer experience come together.
Sure.
Some take that further by changing the operating model in line with that. Others find ways in which they can stay within the current operating rubric and maybe revamp processes. But it's definitely a question that I'm seeing across most consumer product companies, regardless of maturity level.
Makes a lot of sense. So the last of the big questions before we get onto a part that I find particularly fun.
Which I will hate, I know.
Which I'm sure you'll hate, which you have no idea about. The last one was just really something we can't ignore if we're here talking about media and advertising right now and we don't bring generative AI up.
Yeah.
We've missed a trick. So
Okay.
we know, we look back at any big event and a lot of the mainstream sort of media, right, it's getting a lot of attention alongside retail media, alongside CTV to some extent. And I think if Cannes showed us anything this year, retail media and generative AI are big expected growth drivers for the industry. So I wondered from your point of view, what applications of generative AI can you see that are going to help to drive the growth of retail media? And if not just retail media, consumer and maybe shopping behaviors at large?
Yeah, personally, I don't believe we have yet come to comprehend the impact that generative AI will have on many facets of our humanity. I think from a Bain & Company perspective, it's no secret that we believe in the opportunity. The partnership that we have with OpenAI is testament to that. In terms of the types of questions that we are getting from clients, it is very much along the lines of what should my generative AI strategy look like? What are the pockets of opportunity that I see within my business? There's opportunities around efficiency as well as effectiveness. And I think when it comes to marketing, to give a pointed example, some of the developments that we are seeing with creative, and the opportunity to leverage generative AI to create the content that today is so difficult to do with the existing setups at scale, with the level of customization that is required, and to really feed that across the multiple touch points that are influencing that consumer, that shopper down the line. I think that's a very tangible use case of the technology. What is interesting though is what we're seeing now as well. I don't know if you saw that a couple of weeks ago or only a few days ago, some of the rulings around copyright for some of those Gen AI generated content. And so I think we're really early on in understanding the opportunity, but also understanding how regulatory bodies and the like are going to impact the applications that we have on that. But it's a super exciting space.
I definitely think you and I should meet about 10 years from now at this pub and basically revisit that question and see what's happened.
Sounds like a plan.
That makes a lot of sense. And do you have any generative AI wall art on any of your walls at home just yet, or not got there
Well,
yet?
my sister is a digital artist, so I'm privileged to count on what she does and to get that vantage point from the creator herself. So I don't have any Gen AI art in my home. What I have is things that she or my niece may have done in play, and I love it because it's very personal and it has a lot more meaning for me.
Brilliant. Ruth, you did great there. Now we get to the fun part for us at least.
Oh my
We
God,
have 5
I've been dreading this. This was the one thing that made me almost back out of this.
It's taking the control away because you have no idea about the questions. We're just going to keep it fun. So we're going to go with like 5 quick fire questions that I've come up with.
Okay.
Ready to go?
Ready. Let's do
So
it.
you've been in the media and advertising game for a long time.
Yeah.
You have to have been to karaoke a couple of times. What's your go-to karaoke song?
Whitney Houston, I Want to Dance with Somebody.
That's a great song.
My age is showing in my choice, right?
I could imagine you doing a rendition of it right now, especially if we'd had a couple of more beers. So, next one up, when it comes to grocery shopping, one big shop or lots of small shops?
I outsource that to my partner.
What does he do?
All online.
All online.
Ocado.
Lots of it.
Literally obsessed. 2 deliveries a week.
Wow.
Yes, that app gets a lot of time
You
in
must
my
have
household.
like a subscription or something, right? For like all you can eat deliveries.
It's very active, let's put it that way.
Brilliant. So you turn up at Bain and Company tomorrow and they offer you that you can have one superpower of your choice, but you can only use it at work. What would it be?
See the future?
Of course it would be. That would come in handy right now.
Yeah, it will come super handy.
You could become super rich, super quick, I think,
Yeah,
right?
why not?
Awesome. And what is the most memorable ad that you remember?
Most memorable ad that I remember. I love those Art Deco inspired Campari ads. I think they are phenomenal in terms of the quality of the execution, the color combinations, and that desire to just have a nice Campari drink somewhere sunny.
Yeah.
They're so effective, and I remember them. I would put them on my house as art.
Okay,
Maybe that would be the Gen AI thing.
That
I'm
could be the
gonna
Gen
do.
AI thing, and you could even do that as soon as this weekend.
Exactly,
So it could be
there
pretty
you
good.
go.
And the last one, a year from now, there's an apocalypse around industry events, and they all go away apart from 3. It's Cannes, it's CES, and it's Mexico. Which one would you go to if you could only go to one? Tough question.
I mean, they all have value, right? But there's only one location. And I've already sort of given it away by saying I do love a Campari drink in the sun. So you interpret that as you may.
So it's got to be Cannes, right? Yeah, I'd probably agree with you there. But are you going to be at Mexico next month?
I won't be, sadly.
Okay, all
but
right.
I have my parents here, so I have a very good excuse. It's my dad's 75th birthday.
I think that counts. We'll make sure we hit your quota of beers for you when we're out there.
Sounds good.
Ruth, you've been an amazing guest. I wanted to say thank you so much for
much.
taking the time. I'm sure that's going to be insightful for our viewers, and let's enjoy the rest of our drink.
Yeah, with pleasure. And if anyone has any questions, let them know. They can get in touch.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Thanks, Ruth. Thank you.
Bye.